If the Nighthawks had it, it also practically meant that he had it. There was no way that they would be unwilling to share the potion formula of Sequence 8. At most, he would be required to accumulate his contributions over time. After all, he had only become a seer recently. It would still be a long time until he fully digested it. As his thoughts churned, Klein quickly walked next to Hassan. The gentleman in his grey windbreaker struggled to sit up, but failed at every try. He was covered in dust and mud from the fall. "Mr. Hassan, what do you need me to do?" he asked, squatting down. He pointed the revolver in his hand at the ground in case of a misfire. Aya gasped for air and sighed. The monster was too strong, if not for its weakness. Then he pointed at a sky-blue metal bottle beside him and said in a self-deprecating laugh, "I was trying to consume some medicine, but my hand shook." The sky-blue bottle was about the size of Klein's finger. It was not longer than 5 centimeters long, and a cap that hid spiral patterns had fallen to the side. The liquid had completely spilled. Klein reached out to pick up the bottle. As he looked at it with narrowed eyes, he answered helplessly, "Mr. Hassan, there are only a few drops left in the bottle. Go to Borgia and search his body, in his inner pockets," Ayo said as he gasped for breath. "All right." Klein stood up and casually asked, "Is this restorative medicine? An item from mysticism?" "No, it only has certain restorative effects. The main goal is to stimulate our minds and squeeze out the potential of our bodies. It allows to maintain a decent state for a short period of time until we return, where we can receive treatment." Aya attempted to sit up only to fail again. "Its name is the goddess's gaze. Remember to let Borgia drink half a bottle." Klein did not delay any further as he turned around. He briskly arrived at Borgia, who was groaning in pain. He found the uniform sky-blue metal bottle from the Nighthawk's pocket. After removing the cap, he carefully held the bottle to Borgia's mouth. Having sensed it, Borgia tried hard to open his lips. The bottle was held up as dark red liquid flowed in Borgia's mouth. Klein estimated the quantity and stopped just in time. He then screwed the cap back on. The medicine was rather effective. It only took Borgia a few seconds after drinking to regain the spirit in his eyes. Furthermore, he whispered, "Thank you." With that said, he pressed down on the ground as he slowly sat up. He first dealt with his wounds before walking to the unconscious Larotta and Dunn. Then, he retrieved the goddess's gaze from the latter's inner pocket. Klein returned to Aya's side and fed him the remaining half-bottle. After Aya panted a few times, his actions suddenly became nimbler. He stood up as though he had never been injured. "I'll help Borgia. Help that partner of yours." The gentleman with the charm of a middle-aged man pointed at Leonard Mitchell. Klein had no objections to it. He turned around and jogged to the poet. "Leonard, there's no need. I can drink it by myself." Leonard, with his disheveled hair, smiled as he raised the sky-blue bottle. Upon seeing Leonard agilely get up by pushing up with one hand, Klein, who wanted to lampoon, was suddenly stunned. Leonard's injuries are lighter than I expected. He had the ability to consume the medicine from the very beginning. That also means that he could see me walk counterclockwise as I did the luck enhancement ritual. No, that's still all right. I had chanted inwardly, and the luck enhancement ritual does not appear odd in any way, or the suited clown would not have fallen for it. But even so, Leonard, who had long recovered but chose to watch by the sidelines, had seen quite a lot. Things like me not being affected by 2049 and my sneak attack on the suited clown. Just as Klein's eyes narrowed slightly, Leonard, who was walking in his direction, stopped beside him and chuckled softly. "I actually wanted to save you, but discovered that you didn't need it." "Don't mind it. There are many special people in this world that can always do things others can't, such as you and me. Leonard smiled as he went past Klein and walked to the awakening Dunn and Larotta. Narcissist. Klein thought silently as he felt a lot more relaxed. From the looks of it, Leonard Mitchell hid quite a bit of secrets. As he regrouped with the rest, while deep in thought, he saw Captain Dunn wear a cloth and pick up the Antigonus family notebook that was covered in yellowish-brown blood stains. The notebook's cover was completely made of thick black paper. It suffused an aura from an ancient and distant time without any signs of softening or rotting. It was nearly identical to the one he saw in his dream. He even suspected that flipping it open would only make him see the fool wearing splendid headgear. However, he soon realized that he was overthinking things, since Dunn had flipped open the notebook to make a final confirmation. Klein was unable to discern the words on it due to his poor angle, but he was certain that there was no drawing of the fool with his gorgeous clothes and splendid headdress. Ahem, there's nothing wrong with it. Dunn closed the notebook and held it securely. Then he looked at Ayur and company. Let's store this notebook and sealed artifact 2, 049 behind Tingen's Shannis Gate. We can wait until all of you are recovered or Backlund sends someone over. Upon hearing that, Klein felt a little disappointed once again, but also felt happy. He wished to see the Antigonus family's notebook once more and figure out the reason for the death of the original Klein, Welch, and Naya. However, he also felt that the ancient item was filled with misfortune. It often brought catastrophe, so he did not dare touch it. Handing it to the church's headquarters and sealing it is considered the best choice. He secretly heaved a sigh of relief. All right. Aya Hassan, Borgia, and Larotta nodded in unison. They then turned around and arrived beside sealed artifact 2049. They woke each other up and stuffed the puppet, which had resumed moving into the black chest with an opening as they monitored it strictly. Everything is back to normal. Aya sounded a little more relaxed. Inside the dimly lit black chest, the puppet, wrapped in oil-stained cloth, flipped over with its body creaking as it aligned its clown-painted face with the light's source. On the creepy face, under the black pupilless eyes, 2 hardly noticeable crimson cracks appeared. Meanwhile, Dunn, Leonard, and Klein, who had mustered his courage, began searching the suited clown's corpse. They found paper flowers, handkerchiefs, poker cards, glass pieces, and all sorts of strange items. However, apart from that, he did not seem to carry anything of worth or potential clues. Other than the wallet with 70 to 80 pounds and 10 plus soli. Klein secretly sighed. With money in mind, he immediately looked down and inspected himself. His face nearly fell, literally. His formal suit that cost several pounds had torn in 5 to 6 spots, which required mending due to his rolling on the ground. Furthermore, it was covered in dust and dirt stains. Dunn shot him a glance as the corner of his lips curved up. Losses during a mission can be reimbursed. Reimbursed? Upon hearing the term invented by Emperor Roselle, Klein instantly felt wonderful. Yeah. This suit just needs some proper cleaning and mending before it can be worn again. It will still be presentable. When the reimbursement comes, I can buy another set and I can take turns wearing them. I am not the kind of person that uses a reimbursement for something other than what it was intended for. However, I should consider getting a set of clothes for combat in the future, such as a black windbreaker like Captain. Clothes with slightly poorer material would be much cheaper than a tuxedo. Tisk has the reason why the bastard, Leonard, doesn't like wearing formal suits been due to him having such considerations. Let Fry take care of the dead body. We'll see if he can find what the man originally looked like or find any relevant clues. Dunn touched the suited clown's face paint with his gloves. Then they searched the innermost warehouse and saw that there were splotches of bloody flesh that looked like they had been smashed by boulders. They also saw one white bone after another that had been strewn everywhere. Ray Bieber was absorbing the power in the notebook via an ancient ritual, just like how we would consume a higher-level sequence potion. A ritual like that is full of danger. It must be performed in an environment isolated from all disturbances, and the ritual would have required him to enter a deep sleep for a certain amount of time. That was probably why he had yet to leave Tingen. Dunn guessed at the possibilities after inspecting the warehouse. Upon hearing such a description, Lorotta laughed. Her black hair contrasted sharply with her pale face. Such a pity. We awakened him ahead of time. His anger at being woken up truly left a deep impression on us. This is a kind of losing control. Dunn looked towards Klein and told him, as both an explanation and a lecture. Why didn't he just leave Tingen and try to absorb it elsewhere? Asked a perplexed Klein. Ayer laughed and pointed to his head. People influenced by ancient or sinister powers often are lacking in this department. At that moment, Dunn inhaled and said while hiding his pain, "Leonard, you are still in good condition. Stay here and do not allow ordinary people to come close. The rest of us will immediately search for items among Ray Bieber's remains. We will return with them and the sealed artifact, as well as the Antigonus family's notebook. We will then get Fry, Royale, and the police to come here." Chapter 77. Remnant Items. "All right," answered Leonard with a relaxed expression when he heard Dunn's suggestion. Following that, everyone walked out of the warehouse and came close to where Monster Bieber had self-destructed. With him at the origin, they began searching outwards radially. "Captain, what are we looking for?" Klein looked at the rotting flesh and blood that was strewn everywhere. He held back his urge to retch as he looked at Dunn Smith beside him ponderingly. Dunn did not look up. Instead, he used his deep grey eyes to sweep the ground. Awakening ahead of time, losing control, and becoming a monster. This means that Ray Bieber did not fully absorb the Beyonder powers provided by the notebook. It also means that a part of his body is considered extraordinary, making it prime material. If you ever encounter something similar, make sure not to miss out on doing a search. It might be a relatively important item. So that's the case. Klein nodded slightly in enlightenment. In the blink of an eye, he thought of another matter. If the part where Monster Bieber had concentrated the Beyonder powers were some indescribable part, wouldn't that be awkward? Wouldn't it be extremely disgusting to concoct it into a potion? Just as Klein's mind wandered, Borgia, with his sharp eagle-like eyes, suddenly shouted, "Found it! Ahem!" Dunn and company immediately turned and closed in. Driven by his curiosity, Klein walked over to Borgia with a quickened pace. Soon he saw the item before Borgia. It was a greyish-white item about the size of a fist. Its surface was filled with gullies, and it looked soft but ductile. It looked like a brain that had been extracted out of a living being. Although Klein was unable to make out the extraordinariness of the blob of greyish-white, he was certain that Borgia had not made a mistake, since it had remained intact despite the violent explosion it had undergone. Dunn carefully observed it and squatted down. As he extended and bent his right arm, he used his black-gloved left hand to carefully grab the greyish-white item. The moment it was touched, the blob of greyish-white immediately spread out into an extremely sticky liquid. At that moment, Aya Hassan took out a tin-coloured square case, removed the cigarettes from them, and placed them into his pocket. Then he handed the square case to Dunn and smiled. "I know. You only like pipes." Dunn chuckled and took the square case. Then he poured the grayish-white sticky liquid into the case for temporary storage. After storing it away, everyone did a cursory sweep of the area. After confirming that they had not missed out anything, they left. When they came out, they saw the horses digging their hooves into the ground, clearly spooked and nervous. They had nearly escaped their reins. "I'll drive." Borgia covered his mouth with his hand and coughed softly. "I know you are good at placating animals," said Aya, with a smiling nod. After boarding the carriage, Dunn, Larotta, Aya Harson, and Klein, who continued their arm exercises, temporarily had nothing to say as they fell into silence. When the trotting of the horses sounded while the carriage wheeled off, Dunn looked at Klein and deliberated over his words before saying, "I know you are filled with curiosity about the Antigonus family's notebook. You wish to understand what happened." "No, not at all," Klein subconsciously denied. It was an ancient relic filled with misfortune. Without giving him time to answer, Dunn continued and said, "However, I have to first report this to the Holy Cathedral. Only after they determine the confidentiality level of the notebook can we consider if this can be shown to you." "No problem." Klein gave a short and simple reply. Dunn continued his arm exercises as he thought before saying, "I once promised that you can be made a formal member of the Nighthawks when we confirm that Ray Bieber is a descendant of the Antigonus family clan. Now, not only have we determined Ray Bieber's identity, we have even eliminated the monster and spoiled the Secret Order's conspiracy. In this entire process, your performance was outstanding. You personally killed a member of an evil organization. Therefore, I will fulfill my promise and immediately make an application to the Holy Cathedral. We'll wait for their approval." "Right. I forgot something important. I still need to ask if you are agreeable to it. Mr. Klein Moretti, are you willing to formally join the Tingan Nighthawks as one of its members? Your salary will increase several-fold, reaching £6 a week. Furthermore, you will get a raise every subsequent year. Your salary will be paid by the church and ADWA County's police department equally. You will also gain the identity of a probationary inspector. It will be very useful at times. As a support-type Beyonder, you do not always need to face enemies, but you will have to guard Chanis Gate once a week. Without the squad's permission, you are not to leave Tingan without permission. Furthermore, you have to keep this a secret from your family." By the time Dunn finished listing the restrictions and benefits, Klein was already thinking deeply for more than 10 seconds. "I wish to become a formal Nighthawk." Only by doing so could he continue to gain more access to mystery, such as the situation regarding the Secret Order. After reading the gathered Roselle diaries, Klein had some changes in thoughts about himself. Being skilled in mysticism knowledge to seek a way home was an immutable goal of his. Raising his strength further to more safely make the mysterious space above the grey fog do his bidding before using it to return home was a new addition to his goals. Just as Emperor Roselle said, simply relying on external powers was very dangerous. Furthermore, after becoming a seer and obtaining Beyonder powers, Klein sensed that he had a better grasp of the mysterious space. For example, he could pull another person into the gathering. This forced him to consider what possibly beneficial changes would happen to the mysterious space above the grey fog when he reached Sequence 8, Sequence 7, or an even higher sequence. Of course, Klein knew very well that this was built on the premise that he completely resolved the side effects of the seer potion. He could not rush or be rash. "Very well. Once the Holy Cathedral approves of it, you will become one of us." Dunn's grey eyes were tinted with a hint of joy. At that moment, Aya Harson, who was listening in, interrupted. "Klein, don't mind me calling you Klein. Your performance today was really excellent. You managed to kill a Beyonder from the Secret Order. I even suspect that he has reached Sequence 7. How did you do it? I really find it incredulous." The question has finally been raised. Having long prepared for it, Klein acted as though he was organizing his thoughts. He knew that it was indeed incredible and enigmatic that he had killed a Beyonder that ran rings around Dunn, Ayer, and Larotta. Ayer and company were not blind or dumb, so it was a matter of time before they inquired about the process. However, he never expected them to wait till this moment. That's right. Captain and Mr. Harson were previously injured, and their situations could have worsened at any time. At that moment, any matter that could result in conflict had to be put on hold. It was to prevent me from acting desperately because of my exposed secret. Only after I expressed my attitude and showed that I was willing to be a Nighthawk were they at ease enough to ask, "How crafty?" They did not have any obvious communication between themselves, but they had made the same tacit decision. Klein answered as though in thought, "It's an extremely lucky event. The clown in the tuxedo had made a fatal misjudgment." Back then, sealed artifact 2, 049 was thrown near me as a result of the explosion's blast. It looked about 5 to 6 meters from me, but it was only a crude observation. It was very easy to come to the conclusion that I was within the sealed artifact's area of influence. And back then, I was feeling faint because of the explosion. My actions turned sluggish and looked as though I was being controlled. It was unknown when that suited clown came close to me in an invisible state. He tried to entice me by offering to save me and the corresponding Sequence 8 clown of the seer potion. He wanted me to help him retrieve the Antigonus family's notebook. Right, he said that the secret order is in control of the seer potion's corresponding sequence pathway and that he was once a seer. Klein recounted the situation back then in detail. He even described the theories he had back then, including how he believed that the suited clown had divined that taking the notebook would be an extremely risky endeavor. Thus, he had changed his plans. Of course, all the truths were used to conceal the lie made in the beginning, that he had been controlled by sealed artifact 2, 049. Divined that it was extremely risky to retrieve the notebook. Yes, it's indeed highly risky. However, the risk was actually because of you, said Larotta with a chuckle as she covered her mouth. His divination was right, but it caused him to end up in a fatal situation. This sure is an interesting account. Klein was taken aback before he nodded seriously. Indeed, divination is never crystal clear, and that vagueness only means that an interpretation can be wrong. Yes, I have to take note of that. How did you finish him off after that? Asked Dunn, while he did his arm exercises and leaned back. Klein smiled. I pretended to agree to him and made him awaken me. However, he did not dare enter the effective range of the sealed artifact. He stayed 2 to 3 meters away and used a strange paper slip in an attempt to push me. I seized the opportunity and pulled at his paper slip, causing him to be thrown into 049's effective range. I then complemented it with repeated shots and completed my goal. It's quite an embarrassing matter for me. I didn't even have the confidence of hitting him despite being only 2 to 3 meters away from him. Ayur nodded slightly. With his evasive abilities, a distance of 2 to 3 meters is not an absolute guarantee. You might be able to strike him, but fail to hit him in a vital spot. That would only make things worse. Your choice back then was impeccable. It can even be said to be outstanding. If I were in your shoes, I might not have been able to do it better than you. He did not ask further. After all, the suited clown's entry into the sealed artifact 2, 049's area of influence, basically sealed his fate. He became a living target. The subsequent sequence of seer is clown. How odd, Dunn suddenly said with a sigh. Chapter 78. Trauma. Aya Harson added, Exactly. It is hard to imagine that the subsequent sequence of seer would be clown. According to normal logic, no one would link them together. Is that strange? I remember that quite a number of sequence potions also seem to lack similarities between their different levels. Larotta covered her mouth as she yawned. It was obvious that her injuries were more severe. Not even Goddess's gaze could help her to maintain her vibrant energy. No, Larotta. This is completely different. Even if the other sequence potions are lacking a connection, we can also find common points if viewed from a different angle. However, I cannot comprehend it for Seer and Clown at all, said Ayah Hassan as he shook his head and sighed. Klein listened to their discussion and laughed. No, there's still a common point. What? Ayah asked curiously. Even Dunn's arm exercises clearly slowed down. Klein replied without hesitation, be it a seer or a clown, both of them can be found at the circus. Ayah, Dunn, and Larotta were stunned. Pfft, quite a good answer. I like young man like you. Larotta was the first to return to her senses as she burst out laughing. Ayah also smiled as he shook his head. In this era, the number of gentlemen who are equipped with the spirit of self-deprecation is decreasing. Thankfully, we have met one today. Do you think I like to engage in self-deprecation? It's not like I figured out any commonality between the two, Klein complained internally as he replied with a wry smile. I only wish that the potions of the sequence pathway would not have names like Beast Tamer, Acrobat, or Magician. That would really form a circus. Furthermore, it's a one-man circus. Ha ha ha! Dunn and company were immediately amused. It filled the carriage with a joyous atmosphere. The carriage proceeded straight for Zutelen Street. Klein, who was not injured, was the first to enter Blackthorn Security Company. Goddess, what happened to you? Why are you like that? Roseanne exclaimed when she caught sight of him. Klein looked down at his dirty and tattered suit. He replied with his heart aching, there are always all kinds of accidents during a mission. Thankfully, the goddess blessed us, and it ended beautifully. Praise the lady. Roseanne devoutly drew the crimson moon across her chest. Before waiting for Klein to continue, she asked, do you need us to hide in the third floor again? Is the sealed artifact really that dangerous? Trust me, it's far more dangerous than you can imagine, replied Klein, with a lingering fear. If not for his even more mysterious luck enhancement ritual, he would have perished under the proverbial hands of 2049. Goddess. Roseanne's lips quivered as though she had still a million things to say or questions to ask, but in consideration of how the captain was waiting downstairs, she held back her compulsion. She informed Mrs. Oriana and company to head upstairs to the third floor. The neighbors of Blackthorn Security Company were either estates of the church or devout clergymen who vaguely knew of the situation. When all the civilian staff dispersed, Klein did not rush to the entertainment room to inform the other Nighthawks. He immediately returned and helped the captain and the rest escort sealed artifact 2049, Monster Bieber's Remnants, and the Antigonus family's notebook to the second floor. Through the partition, Dunn pushed open the entertainment room's door and said to the two Nighthawks who were playing Gwent cards, Fry, Royale, both of you are to immediately head to the harbor's Tyrrell warehouse and aid Leonard in dealing with the aftermath. All right, Royale, with her raven-black hair and cold expression, was the first to stand up. Corpse Collector Fry, with his black hair, blue eyes, and pale skin, stood up next. They put down their Gwent cards and walked out the entertainment room, and when they passed through the partition, they clearly paused. Wait, Dunn shouted, not letting down their expectations. What else is there? Sleepless Royale turned her head back and asked without an expression. Remember to inform the police. Let them seal off the road. Prevent anyone from coming close until you are done with the scene and move the corpse back, Dunn said, smacking his forehead. All right. Royale turned around and took 2 steps before pausing once again. She turned her head, blinked, and confirmed coldly, "Captain, is there nothing else?" "No," Dunn answered categorically. Royale nodded unnoticeably and walked towards the entrance. As for Corpse Collector Fry, who exuded coldness and darkness, he maintained his adequate pace. At that moment, Dunn added, "Remember to tell Rosanna, Mrs. Oriana, and company that they can come down." "No problem," Fry calmly replied, as though no emotions stirred in him. Klein watched as the two Nighthawks walked out the door and went upstairs before heaving a secret sigh of relief. He followed the captain and the rest underground. They proceeded straight to Chanis Gate. As Dunn gestured for Sleepless Kenley to open Chanis Gate, he instructed Klein, "Go to the Armory and get old Neil here. We need his ritualistic magic to heal ourselves." As the effects of the medicine began to wear off, his mental state gradually waned. "All right." Klein did not wait for the captain to continue as he added, "I will watch the Armory in old Neil's place. I will also request for at least 20 demon-hunting bullets and also wait for the Holy Cathedral's approval, curbing my curiosity about the Antigonus family's notebook." Dunn was instantly at a loss for words. "Captain, is there anything else?" asked Klein, with a smile after beating Dunn to it. Dunn shook his head and remained speechless. He pulled out his cane and turned around. After walking a certain distance, Klein turned into the Armory and recounted the happenings generally to old Neil, who was drinking plain water. "He became a monster that lost control? You even killed a Beyonder?" Old Neil quickly tidied up his desk. "It's like I'm listening to the script of a play." He mumbled as he circled around the desk and walked straight towards the corridor without waiting for Klein's answer. Klein asked out of curiosity, "Mr. Neil, doesn't the church have real restorative medicine? Why would ritualistic magic be needed? No medicine made with ordinary ingredients can provide the permanent restorative effects of a ritual. Extraordinary ingredients are very rare, and most of them are not suitable for restorative medicine," old Neil explained casually. "You should know about Goddess's gaze, right? When the medicine is first made via a ritual, it would be a standard real restorative medicine. But every minute after its completion, its effect evaporates until little of its efficacy is left." "I see." Klein nodded disappointedly. As a former keyboard warrior and avid gamer, it was a habit to yearn for a medicine with magical healing properties. He watched old Neil leave and sat down, taking in the tranquility that he had not had in a very long time. In the midst of his peace, he recalled the tragic death of the suited clown. He recalled himself shooting coldly, the gruesome wound, and the spewing of fresh blood. Klein's body shivered as he felt discomfort. He first stood up, then sat down, then slowly repeated the process. He also did some pacing back and forth in between. Phew. He let out a breath and decided to occupy himself with something so that he could stop thinking of those negative images. Klein took off his silk hat and formal suit. He then took out a handkerchief and a brush to clean off the dirt and mud. After an uncertain amount of time, he heard old Neil's familiar footsteps. Old Neil's gait involved him walking on his heels, and it made a distinctive noise as he ambled down the hall. "How tiring!" old Neil complained as he walked into the room. "Tell the rest that no one is to come here within the next hour. I need to rest," he instructed casually, glancing towards Klein. "Why don't you rest upstairs, and I keep watch here?" Klein suggested out of kindness. Old Neil shook his head. "It's too noisy upstairs. Roseanne is a lady who just can't stop talking." "All right." Klein did not insist. He put on his coat and hat, picked up his cane, and returned to the corridor. Then he pulled the Armory's door ajar. Tap, tap, tap. He slowly walked on the empty path when he suddenly saw many rooms he had never seen previously by the side. "There is a secret door here." Klein stopped at a spot around a bend as he looked at the room. he discovered that corpse collector Fry had already returned. He was carefully examining a completely dissected corpse. Corpse? Klein's heart stirred as he mustered his courage and approached the room. He knocked lightly on the open door. Knock, knock, knock. Fry stopped his actions and turned around, looking over with his blue but ice-cold eyes. "Sorry for disturbing you. I just wish to know if this is a corpse of a Beyonder," asked Klein as he controlled his tone. "Yes." Fry's lips opened and closed, but only spat out a single word. Klein's gaze reached beyond him and landed on the corpse. Indeed, he discovered the familiar gruesome wound on the forehead. "It's that suited clown." Klein secretly exhaled and said, "Any discoveries?" "No," answered Fry in an abnormally simple manner. The mood instantly turned awkward. Just as Klein was about to bade farewell, Fry took the initiative to say, "If you feel uncomfortable, you can come in to take a look. You will discover that it's only a corpse." "Afraid that I'll be traumatized?" Klein nodded in thought. "All right." He entered the room and came in front of the long, white-clothed table as he looked at the corpse. The suited clown's red, yellow, and white paint had been cleaned off, revealing an unfamiliar face that did not look anything special. He was in his 30s and had black hair and a high nose bridge. At that moment, Fry went to a square table by the corner of the wall and picked up a pencil and piece of paper. He returned to the corpse and placed the paper down and began drawing with the pencil. Klein glanced at it in curiosity and found that Fry was sketching the suited clown's head. It did not take long before Fry stopped moving the pencil. On the piece of paper, there was a lifelike portrait. Compared to the corpse, the only difference was the lack of a wound with the addition of blue eyes. What a talented genius! Klein marveled in surprise. "I never expected you to be that good at sketching. My dream was to become an artist before becoming a Nighthawk." Fry's tone was completely placid. "Then why don't you fulfill your dreams?" asked Klein curiously. Fry put down his pencil and said, with the suited clown's portrait in hand, "My father was a priest of the goddess. He wished that I become a priest. It's a presentable job." "You became a priest?" Klein asked in surprise. He found it unimaginable that Fry could become a priest with his personality and the vibes he exuded. "Yeah, I did quite an okay job." Fry wore a cold expression as the corners of his mouth curled up a little as he replied. "Later, I encountered and experienced some things and ended up a Nighthawk." Klein did not plan on infringing on his privacy, so he asked, "You were once a priest of the goddess, so why not choose to be a sleepless?" "A personal reason," answered Fry frankly. "Furthermore, Madame Daly is a good role model." Klein nodded, and just as he was about to change the subject, he heard Fry say, "Help me watch this room. I have to immediately hand the sketch to Captain. Closing a secret door is very troublesome." "All right." Although Klein was a little afraid facing a corpse alone, he braved his fear in agreement. With Fry gone, the room turned quiet. The corpse laid there as Klein's heart turned heavy. He took a few breaths and, in a bid to defeat his fears, approached the long table. The suited clown lay there silently with his pale face. His eyes were tightly shut, and he had lost all signs of breathing. Apart from the gruesome wound, he emitted the unique coldness of a dead man. Klein observed for a moment as his emotions gradually settled as he was calming down. He swept his gaze and discovered a strange brand on the suited clown's wrist. Gathering his courage, he extended his hand to touch it, hoping to turn it around to see it more clearly. Just as the ice-cold touch reached from Klein's fingertips to his brain, the pale palm that had lost all vibrancy shot up suddenly, grabbing him by the wrist. It grabbed at his wrist tightly. Chapter 79. Another Murmuring, Klein instantly felt his hair stand on end as the icy hand tightened around his wrist. He instinctively pulled his wrist back in a desperate attempt to escape. A heavy sensation bore down on him as Klein used every fiber of strength in his entire body to yank his arm back. Bam! The pale, naked corpse was yanked so forcefully to the side that it fell from the autopsy table. However, the white, ice-cold finger's grip remained firmly latched onto Klein's wrist. Klein momentarily lost the ability to think. The only thought that went through his mind was to draw his revolver and riddle the corpse in holes. However, as he could not retract his dominant hand, he threw his black cane and desperately tried to retrieve his revolver from his holster to no avail. At that moment, the corpse's eyes rose, revealing a pair of calm, blue eyes. His mouth moved as he muttered, "Horlas, Horlas, Horlas." After those 3 words were said, Klein was completely flustered as he felt that the fingers gripping onto his wrist began to loosen before dropping limp. The suited clown's eyes were shut once again, as though nothing had happened at all. If the pale corpse wasn't lying on the stone floor, Klein would have imagined that he had been struck by a hallucination spell. He staggered backwards a few steps and felt that most of his body was trembling as a result of the shock and fear. Phew. Phew. Klein gasped for air as he slowly regained control of his mental facilities. He looked at the corpse on the ground in alarm and fear. He drew his revolver and carefully retreated from the room, 1 step at a time. After confirming that the corpse was motionless, he took a glance at his wrist of the hand, holding onto his revolver. There were 5 deep, red finger marks imprinted on his wrist. They silently described his encounter. Klein calmed down as vulgarities filled his mind. F***cacking hell. I almost died from the shock. After panting for more than 10 seconds, he began assembling items in his mind to quickly compose himself. He carefully recalled everything that he encountered and pieced them together. Although he did not understand the reason for the suited clown's resurrection, he acutely noticed an important point. The corpse had repeated the words, "Horlas." "It's Horlas again." Klein knitted his brows. The Antigonus family's notebook has records of a nation of the Evernight in the Horlas mountain range. While in cogitation or spirit vision, I would hear sounds that I shouldn't be able to hear, and among those sounds is the word Horlas. Is the answer to all these questions on the Horlas mountain range? There might be massive danger lurking there. For example, an evil god might be sealed within and was using various forms of attraction to achieve freedom. While considering this, Klein carefully entered the room and touched the corpse a few times to verify that it was completely dead. He didn't want Corpse Collector Fry to see him mess up the place, so he mustered his courage to move the corpse back onto the autopsy table. Klein couldn't help but feel as though his heart was in his mouth throughout the process. The slightest movement could snap his tense nerves. Furthermore, the ice-cold feeling given out by the corpse felt particularly disgusting. After finishing the mission with great difficulty, he recalled the reason he approached the corpse. Therefore, he focused on the suited clown's wrist and looked at the strange brand. It was unknown when the brand had slipped off, shrinking into a spherical blob of blood which had tint of blue. The spherical blob of blood was the size of a thumb. It floated in mid-air silently in defiance of the laws of physics. "What is this?" Klein muttered, but he didn't dare to touch it rashly. He had no intention of hiding the strange blood sphere. Firstly, he didn't know if it was a good or bad thing. Secondly, he was certain that Fry, who had examined the corpse, would have long discovered the brand on the wrist. It was even likely that he knew what the strange blood sphere was. And even if Fry doesn't know, reporting it to Captain and letting the Nighthawks research it is definitely better than me making random attempts. That was Klein's train of thought. Being in an organization meant he had to know how to make use of the organization's powers to its fullest. Klein waited nervously for a few minutes before he saw the black-haired, blue-eyed, and thin-lipped Fry return. He instantly noticed the strange blood sphere and asked Klein a question he had previously asked himself. "What is this?" "No idea." Klein shook his head honestly. He recounted what had happened without hiding anything. The brand slipped off into a blood sphere. Fry nodded, seemingly deep in thought. The corpse of a Beyonder always tends to have some strange transformations. He looked up and said to Klein, "Bring the captain here. Inform him about the contents that the corpse murmured as well." "All right." Klein was already itching to leave. "You don't have to return with the captain," Fry added. "I believe you won't like to see what happens next." As he spoke, he picked up a silver surgical knife beside him. Klein nodded with some lingering fear. "I was hoping you'd say that." He picked up his cane, wore his hat, and hobbled over to the Shanny gate. At the keeper's room, he saw the no longer frail Captain Dunn. After Dunn heard his recollection of what happened, he nodded indiscernibly. "I'll report the matter to the higher-ups and let the Holy Cathedral deal with it. Maybe they'll send people to the main peak of the Horlas mountain range to take a look." Klein answered briefly in confirmation. Seeing that only sleepless Kenley and the captain were in the keeper's room, he casually asked, "Are Mr. Ayur and the others resting?" Dunn nodded and said, "Ayur and Borgia are at St. Selena Cathedral. Larotta is probably looking for a coffee shop." "Coffee shop? Madame Larotta hasn't recovered from her injuries, right?" Klein asked in surprise. Dunn massaged his nose bridge and said with a laugh, "Larotta has 3 hobbies: coffee, dessert, and maidservants. She says she needs these 3 things to speed up her recovery." "Maidservants?" Klein asked, perplexed. "Does Madame Larotta have a particular fetish?" Dunn shook his head helplessly and said, "She likes maidservants. Yeah, that's right. Furthermore, she likes ones with big breasts." "She sure is weird." Klein had no idea what kind of expression he should show in response. Dunn didn't delay any further as he headed out the keeper's room. As Klein watched his back, he silently waited for him to turn. Meanwhile, he noticed at the corner of his eye that sleepless Kenley had fished out his pocket watch and opened it. 3, 2, 1. The moment Klein finished counting down silently, Dunn stopped and turned around. "Another thing I forgot. Klein, you went through a lot today. Once you relax, you'll feel exhausted. There's no need for you to be here in the afternoon. Go back and get some rest. Tomorrow, I'll submit the application listing the detailed losses." "All right. Don't worry too much about your killing of a Beyonder. Killing him was equivalent to saving more lives. As a matter of fact, I'm actually feeling much better." Klein silently exhaled. Dunn nodded slightly, and just as he turned around, he smacked himself in the forehead. "I've also handed the Beyonder sketch to Leonard. He and the police department are in charge of the follow-up investigations. I believe that the Beyonder must have rode on carriages, eaten food, and had somewhere to stay. Wherever he goes, whatever he touches, whatever he leaves behind, even unconsciously, will serve as a silent witness against him. Emperor Roselle's words are truly sensible." "Yes," Klein answered, stupefied. After the captain walked far away, he left the keeper's room and slowly walked to the 2nd floor. Along the way, he suddenly recalled something as he experienced an additional bout of fear. That suited clown claimed that the Secret Order controlled the corresponding sequence pathway of seers. Even if he was exaggerating and they didn't have the higher sequence potion formulas, they definitely have the lower sequence ones. It also means that they have a number of seers. Then, wouldn't they divine that I killed the suited clown and secretly exact revenge against me? If they can't deal with the Nighthawks, can't they deal with me, a seer without any direct measures against enemies? Klein stopped in the stairwell and began thinking about the problem seriously. Soon, he discovered that he was worrying over nothing. Firstly, the secret order doesn't know who are members of the Nighthawks. Secondly, even if they know one or two, they definitely wouldn't include a civilian staff member like me. Thirdly, under the present circumstances, unless they have a prophet, there's no way they can divine who the murderer is. He heaved a sigh of relief and left the Blackthorn Security Company. He took a public carriage back to Daffodil Street. Even though he hadn't eaten lunch yet, he still lacked the appetite. After entering his bedroom, Klein removed his damaged suit first. Then, he took off his half-top hat, got into bed, and tried to go to sleep. His mind remained active, as though his entire existence couldn't relax. His mind wasn't repeating the scene of him shooting the suited clown to death, but of the scene of him moving the corpse and that hair-raising experience. He no longer felt uncomfortable about killing for the first time, but more of a disgust when he thought about it. This was probably Fry's goal. He hoped that I would approach the corpse and face it directly to overcome my trauma. But even though the trauma from before is gone, I've been traumatized by something new. Klein gave a self-deprecating laugh as he gradually felt his nerves calm down. He had no idea when he dozed off, but when he woke up, his stomach was groaning in protest. "I feel like I can eat an entire horse," Klein muttered as he looked at the sun setting in the west as though the sky was elite. Changing into old but comfortable casual clothes, he briskly walked to the first floor. Before he could consider what to make for dinner, he heard the door open. Melissa. The corners of his mouth curled up at the thought. Ever since she began taking the public carriage, his sister no longer returned home late. The key twisted as the door opened. Melissa walked in with her bag that contained her books and stationery. She looked at the kitchen and said, "Klein, there's a letter for you. It's from your mentor." "A letter from mentor?" "Right. I wrote to him asking about the relevant historical situation of the Hornasus main peak." Klein was taken aback at first before he recalled the matter.